The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Let's get caught up on where we are with the Democratic presidential primary. Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders. Hillary Clinton has a very large lead nationally in the Democratic primary. But according to a new Quinnipiac poll, Bernie Sanders is still faring better in hypothetical matchups against some of the more likely Republican presidential candidates. So nationally first, Hillary Clinton currently leading Bernie Sanders by an average of about 59 to 30, or about 29 points nationally. However, we have this new poll from Quinnipiac University, which compares Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders to the four more likely Republican presidential candidates. Let's take a look at this, Lewis. Or where do we want to start? Comparing to Ted Cruz first, if I may. Hillary Clinton leads Ted Cruz by 5 points in a hypothetical matchup compared to Bernie Sanders, who leads Ted Cruz by 10 points in a hypothetical matchup. Hillary Clinton leads Donald Trump by 6 points compared to Bernie, who leads Donald Trump by 8 points in hypothetical matchups. And Hillary Clinton leads Ben Carson by 3 points compared to Bernie Sanders' 6-point lead. And lastly, both Hillary and Bernie lead Marco Rubio by 1 point. So this supports a couple of things. Number one, many of these are sort of within the margin of error, which suggests that actually there is not a drastic difference in many cases with regard to Hillary versus Bernie against the major candidates. But it also supports an idea that I'm increasingly thinking is the right sort of path, which is that Marco Rubio may be the strongest Republican candidate nationally. And we see that Hillary and Bernie both have the smallest lead against Marco Rubio, and that Marco Rubio has been surging within the Republican primary as well. I think Rubio is going to be a contender here on the Republican side.
Yeah, well, I hope so, because he's the least crazy.
In many ways.
In many ways. And so that's what we said to begin with. Well, that we thought that Bush was too. It seems Bush doesn't have a chance, so he's kind of out of the picture. But yeah, Rubio. At least, Dave, I don't know if you saw that commercial of his. At least he can catch and throw a football.
Yes, definitely.
I kind of like that.
And we know that, John Kerry was just killed for once where he sort of juggled a football that was thrown to him. Yeah. On the Republican side, according to the same Quinnipiac poll, and this is not the average of all polls, Donald Trump is in the lead with about 27% support. Marco Rubio in second place at 17%. Ted Cruz and Ben Carson tied at 16%. In an average of national polls, it is still Trump and Carson. So we may be starting to see Ben Carson fall out of favor and Marco Rubio fall into favor. This is only one poll. However, this particular poll does look pretty good. I looked at the party identification. I looked at cell phone versus landline phone. I looked at racial demographics. It seemed like a pretty good poll overall. And what may be going on in part is that the front runner, even though they may do well with regard to favorability, the more known they are, the more unfavorability they will have, merely because some people will see the front runner and say, oh, now that I know more about them, I don't like them. So to sum up, Bernie Sanders, slightly more electable than Hillary Clinton versus the hypothetical Republicans, although within the margin of error against many of those candidates. Here's some interesting video. We've talked about James Dobson before. James Dobson is an evangelical Christian author and the founder of Focus on the Family, which he led until 2003. He is not an ordained minister, but he has been called one of the nation's most influential evangelical leaders. He's no longer affiliated with that horrible, truly vile and reprehensible organization, Focus on the Family. He was recently on TV with Andrew Womack, and I think it's pronounced Womack, although he may pronounce it Womack, another one of these TV Christians, and this is so funny. Andrew Womack posed a sort of hypothetical to James Dobson, saying, why shouldn't we be stoning gays to death? And Dobson hilariously had a really hard time figuring out why we shouldn't stone gays to death, and Womack had to sort of come in and rescue him. Let's take a look at the video. This is really funny.
Questions. Some people are saying, well, if you are going to oppose homosexuality on what the Bible says, it also says that you're supposed to stone them to death. Do you believe in stoning them to death? Do you want to kill all homosexuals?
I don't, and that's a tough question because that comes out of the Mosaic Law. But I don't believe you have to take the entire Bible. And as far as I know, there's no place else in the Bible that tells us to kill those who are don't believe what we believe.
Well, could I answer that one?
Okay.
All right, so we don't need to hear the whole thing. So Womack jumps in and gives some explanation. So Dobson, he knows he doesn't want to kill all gays, but he can't really explain why. And he says, well, I mean, I only know of one place where we're told to kill all gays, so yeah, I don't know. I mean, he has the right instinct, which is I really shouldn't say kill all gays. That's bad. But he's really struggling to figure out why.
Yeah, and Womack astutely points out after that the Old Testament basically says kill everybody.
Right.
But yeah, it's either that, Dave, or he just knows he can't say it on television.
Yeah.
Maybe that's it. But I don't know a lot about Dobson. I know we've talked about him before. On the scale of Christian zealot, Christian extremist, I don't know how far he really goes.
Well, I think it depends on the day and the interview. He said some completely insane stuff, but also sometimes he has more rational instincts like, let's not kill all gay people based on the sexual orientation they're born with. That's a good instinct, and it's a good instinct with a very low barometer, right?
Yeah. Good for him to say, good for the people watching that show to hear. I don't think we need literal interpretations of the Bible, certainly. And
we have this is like a common cherry picking that we see from the evangelicals, which is anytime you point out something crazy in the Old Testament, which they on some occasions claim to follow, they'll say, now we have the new covenant with Jesus. The New Testament has sort of made the Old Testament obsolete, except for the cases where it's still really convenient for them to cite the Old Testament, in which case the Old Testament is great. We see that happen all the time. Let's go from one religious guy, zealot, call him what you want, James Dobson, to another, Rick Joyner. On his most recent segment, Prophetic Perspective on Current Events, Rick Joyner claimed that God personally told him that the New England Patriots would win the Super Bowl last year, and that it was going to be a supernatural sign that patriotism would become more popular because they're called the New England Patriots, and if God chooses them to win, as Joyner said he did, that is a sign that patriotism is coming back to the United States. Let's take a listen to what Rick Joyner had to say. I love this.
Things will be illuminated unless the Lord really speaks to me about something, and sometimes he does. But even then, we see in part, know in part. He shared with me something last year, and it's something I sure didn't want to hear. And I only shared it with a few of our close friends, but way in the beginning of last football season, Lord showed me the New England Patriots were going to win the Super Bowl. He showed me why, and I didn't like his reasons, except, the Lord wanted to honor a certain person, but I didn't like the fact that the New England Patriots, I wanted our Carolina Panthers to win the Super Bowl. Lord said, no, the Patriots are going to win again this year.
Okay, I can't take any more of this garbage. He knew before the football season that the Patriots were going to win, but he didn't tell anybody, not publicly anyway, until much later. That's convenient, right?
Well, he said he only told a few of his personal friends. I'd like to hear from them.
I would love to talk to them.
I'm sure they would probably just say, oh, yeah, he told me about that. But he goes on to say that God does care about football.
Of course.
And
not about starving children in Africa, that 10,000 a day can die. That's not something God cares about. And it's probably not something Rick Joyner cares about either. And it just so happens that they share the same priorities, but they both care about football.
Yeah, well, listen, if God exists and God is a Patriots fan, that's great.
Listen, I'm not a religious person, but if we have God on our side as the New England Patriots, I'm not going to disavow God and say, no, we don't need God's help. Honestly, how does anyone hear this garbage and send money to these people? And have you noticed, Lewis, that they often say, they try to sort of prove that this is really what God said by saying that it's not even something that they like. So this guy says, God told me the Patriots were going to win. I'm not even a Patriots fan. I'm a Panthers fan. So I'm particularly trustworthy because honestly, I would much rather God say it's the Panthers who are going to win. Oh, okay. it's not like he wants the Patriots to win, so I'm sure he's telling the truth about what God told him.
Well, either he's lying or he has actually convinced himself that God told him these things, probably after the fact as well. Probably after the Patriots won, he said, I wonder if that's what that weird dream I had meant, or something like that. Yeah, either way, it's harmful and it's not true.
These zealots are pestilence, right? They contribute nothing to society, and sadly, they are revered by way too many people in this country, as evidenced by the fact that there are so many so-called prosperity pastors who have made ludicrous amounts of money by touting this absolute nonsense. We have a fantastic program for you today. It is Friday. I'm here. Lewis is here. The whole gang is here. And we'll be back right after this.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Our program is not funded by big corporations. It is not funded by big media conglomerates. It's mostly funded by you, members of our audience, through something called David Pakman Show Membership Program. And today's new member of the day is William Kuykendall. William Kuykendall, thank you so much for being a David Pakman Show member. William gets the world-famous bonus show, the commercial-free audio feed of the show, the commercial-free TV feed of the show, so much other great stuff. And if you want to get a free 2016 Patriot Mail calendar with your membership for a few more days at minimum, you can do that at davidpakman.com/calendar16. All right, 3 years ago this week, country singer Trace Adkins wore a Confederate flag during his performance on an NBC Christmas special. The flag was printed on his earpiece that he was wearing. It was very much visible on camera, and there was outrage, and ultimately we did receive an explanation from Mr. Adkins. He said, quote, "As a proud American," this is amazing, "as a proud American, I object to oppression of any kind. To me, the battle flag represents remembrance of my Southern lineage. I am a descendant of Confederate soldiers who followed that flag into battle. I advocate for the preservation of America's battlefields and honest conversation about our country's history. To those who view the flag as a symbol of racism, that was not my message, and I did not intend offense." At the time, there was not as much hubbub over the Confederate flag, right? I mean, more recently, we have seen the hubbub over the Confederate flag increase significantly. I think the reaction would probably be different if he were to do this today. And you know what? Maybe he does do it today at concerts. I have no idea because I can't stand this guy. I actually once saw this guy in concert. I was inadvertently dragged to a country music concert, and this guy shows up and talks about how great it was to have Bush and Cheney there to patriotically lead us into Iraq, and it was just disgusting.
That sounds pretty terrible. Yeah, of course, what was maybe a year ago, there was all the commotion around the, it kind of came to a head around the Confederate flag, resulting in many buildings removing the Confederate flag from their property, state buildings. And Dave, I think it's not as acceptable this day and age.
And he talks about how he doesn't want to ignore the history of the country and that the Confederate flag is a part of that. Fine, but then we have to remember that the Confederate flag was inextricably connected to slavery and racism, even if that's... I like how all these guys say, that's not what it represents for me. Well, it may not represent that for you because you have no idea what the Confederate flag was connected to, right? Just because it doesn't represent that for you doesn't mean that it wasn't connected to some horrible, vile stuff.
Yeah, I guess you could make the same swastika argument, but...
Listen, for me, it's just about the unification of Germany and how great and unified Germany is. Okay, that's terrific that that's what it is for you. For many other people, it's not that, and empirically speaking, that's not the only thing it represents.
Yeah, and so I think it was a poor decision. By comparison, Phil Anselmo, a singer from Pantera,
huge.
Pantera used to use the Confederate flag when they played, in some of their imagery. And after all that stuff happened about a year ago, Phil Anselmo was questioned about it, and he said that he regrets using that image.
Sure. And that's respectable, right? Because you could say, oh, he's backtracking and he's scared of the PC police. this is not the show for the PC police, right? We use the term Islamic terror. We tell it like it is with regard to a lot of issues that the so-called PC left, and I for lack of a better term, I use that term, is hesitant to use. For me, recognizing that the Confederate flag is a vile symbol of so many things that are completely against American values as we understand them to be today, I'm not afraid to say that whatsoever, and it's not a PC thing. It's just a reality.
Yeah. Being PC has nothing to do with it. It's, and I think a lot of our listeners agree with us.
2 years ago this week, corrupt crime lab chemist Annie Dookhan received a sentence of 3 to 5 years in prison. I don't know if you remember the story. She first sort of pulled the wool over our eyes when she was hired for the job of crime lab tech after claiming to have a master's in chemistry, something she also said under sworn testimony. School officials ultimately figured out, no, indeed, she does not have a master's in chemistry. And for years, she was, quote, dry labbing, which is identifying samples just by looking at them. And she even admitted to adding cocaine to a sample when there had been no cocaine actually present. She misidentified samples. She documented an insane amount of testing in spite never having actually looked at many of these samples in front of a microscope. And she somehow, Lewis, maintained her job and got around supervisory critique of what she was doing and all the lies she was telling for a long time.
Yeah, there were red flags, and her supervisors for a long time did nothing. And there was an estimate from a defense attorney or from someone who said that there may have been as many as 40,000 people. It seems really high, but 40,000 people wrongly convicted because of, the samples that were put in front of her. So when we think about the criminal justice system, we think, is this, what's going on with the jury? Is there something up with the jury? Is there something up with the grand jury? Is there something up with the judge? And rarely are we looking at the people in labs like this. I mean, how many people like her are out there right now?
It reminds me of when people think about the sort of responsibility of the job of commercial airline pilot, which carries huge responsibility. But depending on what size plane you're flying and what routes you're flying, you're rarely responsible for more than 500 lives in a day, right? You might fly an 80-seater on 4 short flights, or you might fly a long-haul jet that seats 400 once a day or whatever. Think about the number of lives in the hands of the air traffic controllers. And in the same way, here we're talking about the lawyers, the prosecutors, whoever. Think about the number of lives from the point of view of the criminal justice system in the hands of this one crime lab technician. Truly incredible. 1 year ago this week, a whirlwind of events. We had a grand jury decide not to indict Officer Darren Wilson in the shooting death of Michael Brown. Police shot and killed 12-year-old Tamir Rice, who was playing with a toy gun. It was revealed that there would be no indictment for the cop who killed Eric Garner with an illegal in the sense that it was outlawed by the NYPD with an illegal chokehold. NFL players spoke to the world with their hands up, don't shoot protest. St. Louis police wanted the St. Louis Rams players and other players punished for that. It was just a perfect storm of events, Lewis. Have things improved with regard to police use of force in the year since?
I don't think so, because still, seemingly on a weekly basis, we're reading about police killing someone who was unarmed. There's usually video to accompany it.
Well, if the video is not suspiciously deleted.
Right. And but we're still seeing it very regularly. But maybe we're seeing police departments, maybe we're seeing more charges against these officers.
Yeah, I'm mixed, because on the one hand, we are seeing more charges against some of these police use of force incidents, but we haven't yet gotten to the point of seeing whether there will be convictions and punishments, right? And you need charges in order to eventually get a conviction, but let's see what ultimately happens before we can say with certitude whether the situation is getting any better.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're going to have to keep reading headlines like that for a little while. And Dave, this is probably a problem that will take decades, if not longer, to solve. Ultimately.
Oh, this is a long process and a big problem for sure. Join us on Reddit, discuss these and other stories, davidpakman.com/Reddit. That's REDDIT. It's Friday. We'll take a break. Great interview coming up next.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
For this week's classic interview, we're going back to a real classic. This is from May 15th, 2012. I interviewed a guy named Dr. Michael Brown. This is before the name Michael Brown was made infamous by the horrible shooting in Ferguson, Missouri. This is a different Michael Brown, the guy who wrote a book called, and this is not a joke, A Queer Thing Happened to America. He has a religious radio show. He's been on the show a couple of times. He ended up ending this interview very abruptly. This has only happened a handful of times in the history of the program. This is one of them. So with no more delay, we go back to May of 2012. Dr. Michael Brown. Dr. Michael Brown is the host of the nationally syndicated daily talk radio program, The Line of Fire, also author of A Queer Thing Happened to America and 20 other books, and director of the Coalition of Conscience. Dr. Brown, let's start at the very beginning. What's your thought on President Obama's statement last week that he is now in support of gay marriage?
Well, it's no surprise, actually, for two reasons. First, in 1996, he came out clearly and unequivocally in writing when he was running for office saying that he supported legalizing same-sex marriage and he would oppose any efforts against that. So the statements he made in 2004, 2008, when he said, as a Christian, he opposed same-sex marriage and marriage was a sacred thing and gay marriage was not a civil right, I took all those statements with a grain of salt, especially because in 2008, the same year he made his very Christian positive statement and the debate with Rick Warren, he wrote a letter to the Democratic Club in San Francisco, a gay and lesbian Democratic group in San Francisco, and explained to them that he opposed Proposition 8, the marriage amendment there, that it was divisive and discriminatory. So in my judgment, with all respect to the president, he's been speaking out of two sides of his mouth. And then when we look at his actions, that he says he won't defend DOMA anymore, Defense of Marriage Act, that he fought for the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, that he reported he appointed a gay activist educator like Kevin Jennings to be his safe schools czar, on and on. He's made it clear what his real sentiments are. He's finally come out and said what most of us knew to be the case before he was ever elected.
All right, so let's take a look at that then. So what I'm hearing from you is you're not surprised, even though he has made statements that have indicated a number of different positions over the years. This is the position you believe he truly held, and now we have heard that that is his position from him. Therefore, my next question to you is, do you believe that gay marriage should be legalized in this country?
Well, of course not. It's not marriage. I care about every human being in America. I want every human being to have the best possible life that they can. I'm sure there are couples, same-sex couples that love each other, but it's not marriage.
Okay,
Once
so tell me, where, so let's explore that. I just want to go piece by piece so the audience doesn't miss any of this.
Surely.
Why is it not marriage?
Because marriage has always been the union of a man and a woman with, ideally, a lifetime commitment, and within it, as the general rule, the possibility to procreate and provide children for the next generation who are joined to a mom and a dad.
That's great. Let's
the
stop
only
there for a
reason
second. Let's stop there for a second because we have so much in there
Sure.
even to analyze. So let's go through that. So let's take the second part first, the no ability to procreate. That would also suggest that a couple where the woman is past menopause or couples that for any number of medical issues can't have children, they also should not be able to get married if we look at that one stipulation.
Oh, no, of course not. I said the rule, the general rule, the only ones that can procreate through human history are heterosexuals. And look, there have been homosexual relationships for centuries. There are homosexual relationships, long-term homosexual relationships documented a couple thousand years ago. But no one thought of calling it marriage because marriage was something very distinct.
Well, I don't know that that's the case. I don't know that that's the case. There's a lot of research, particularly from the late chairman of Yale University's history department, John Boswell, which shows that there were homosexual marriage ceremonies in ancient Christian churches that were completely indistinguishable from those heterosexual marriage ceremonies. And this goes back to the Office of Same-Sex Union in the 10th and 11th century. This goes to the Order of Uniting Two Men in the 11th and 12th century. If we look at Sergius and Bacchus's relationship, which was a marriage that was basically okay. And I'm not a religious guy, but if that's the argument to be made, there's plenty of examples of gay marriage in the Bible.
Okay, number one, this is not the Bible. I am a biblical scholar, and it's not the Bible. Every single statement about marriage in the Bible is only male, female. It would be as foreign to talk about two men or two women wedding in the Bible as it would be to talk about marrying an alien or marrying a goat. It's completely foreign. As for John Boswell's work, John Boswell, the gay activist scholar, tragically died of AIDS. And Boswell's stuff has been completely refuted by church scholars. Just study it out. The reason that he discovered this stuff is because he completely misread the text.
So let's focus on today for a second. Let's focus on today. Where is marriage defined as a man and a woman?
It has always been throughout American history from the foundation of our nation. It was always understood. The only reason
it was understood or it was defined somewhere? You understood. So tell me, where is it defined?
It has been defined in every legal document having to do with marriage. David, I actually thought, I guess I didn't know what show I was getting on. No insult, but I thought this was a serious issue. A serious discussion about this issue, not where someone's going to deny you research every single marriage document in American history that has been recognized by the government until the last few years, where some states changed things. There was one definition and one definition only. It was the union of a man and a woman. It's the only definition you'll find in every single dictionary that's ever been written and every single legal document recognized by the government.
So tell me, where can one look up that definition? Just tell me where to look it up. That's all I need. Legally.
Okay, tell you what. Start with every dictionary that has been written in American history.
That's not a legal document. The dictionary. Do you know what? If you looked up the N-word, hold on a second. If you looked up the N-word for a black person 100 years ago in a dictionary, what does a dictionary tell us?
David, okay, tell you what. I am going to have to get going soon because I actually thought this was a serious interview. Not a joke thing, not something that's just trying to set people up for quotes. So here's the deal. You go to any court house in America and just ask them for any marriage document they have from 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, okay? Very, very simple. I don't have to tell you where to find marriage documents. You perfectly know how to do that. And if you were interested in actual information, I'd be sharing it with you.
I really am interested in information. I'm bothered that you don't think I am.
And you genuinely don't know that the only legal definition of marriage that we have ever had since the founding of America has been the union of a man and a woman?
The thing is, it's not whether I know or don't know. I just ask questions, and I'm asking you, so tell me, what is the document that defines that? Because you're saying, well, go to a court and ask them for documents that refer to marriage, but long enough ago where it wasn't already legal, like it is, for example, in Massachusetts. What use is that, Dr. Brown?
Let's do this. I'll send you a copy of my book, A Queer Thing Happened to America. You can get the larger overview of gay activism and its effects on history and its agenda and its goals. After you've gone through that with 1,500 plus endnotes and massive research in there, then we can follow up with other questions you have. Is that fair?
Dr. Brown, you don't set the guidelines for what's required reading to conduct an interview. I didn't send you a list of things you should read before talking to me. What kind of a thing is that to say? Let me review your 1,500 endnotes. This is bizarre, isn't it?
No, it's not. I'm telling you, if you're looking for information, I'm happy to give it to you. But tell you what, I wish you a great day. I hope you do well, and blessings on your work. Thank
All right.
you, sir.
Well, I have many more questions for you. It just doesn't sound like you're ready or able to answer those. We're focusing on documents.
I am perfectly able. I do hundreds of interviews, but not mockery interviews. So, David, you have a good day, but I just want to encourage you to be a serious host next time around and not to ask questions that are so readily available to everyone and that no one even argues with. It's one thing to dispute Bosworth's work.
But if it's so readily available, why couldn't you tell me the document where I can find that definition of marriage if it's so readily available?
I have told you, David, tell you what, I've got better things to do right now. And
if you want to continue to attack and say this is not a serious interview, it's a mockery, feel free to make the ad hominems. Feel free to hang up, sir. You're free to do that.
All right, God bless you, man. I wish you well.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
It's that time of the week, time to answer your questions. It's great when people send questions in. We answer 3 a week. You can call them in. 219-2DavidP is the number. You can send an email. You can tweet them. You can post them to our Facebook page. Whatever. Natalie, first question is from Natalie. Natalie says, David, you've mentioned that you own Tesla stock. What other stocks do you currently own? I'm willing to explore this, Lewis, but I think I should say, number one, I am not a financial advisor. Number two, none of what I say constitutes advice or a suggestion to buy, sell, or do anything in particular with any particular stock. And number three, I've long advocated that buying individual stocks should not be a big part of most people's investments. It is incredibly risky, and it makes far more sense to really invest in index funds. Don't try to time the market. Be in it for the longest term possible, and invest in the broadest possible mutual funds. That being said, yes, I've mentioned I own some shares of Tesla stock. I believe in the company. I think it is going to do well. I know that the stock went down a little bit recently because of lower than expected ratings for a recent model upgrade or something. I don't even pay attention to the micro, and I that's my take on it. I'm in this thing for the long haul, and I think for the long term, Lewis, Tesla is going to be a company that does well.
Sure, yeah, I agree. They're doing great things.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you. As far as other stocks, so I don't really own very many individual stocks, like I said, because I just don't think it's the best way for the average person to invest. Netflix. So I think Netflix is part of the future of television. I know that increasingly competitors to Netflix are starting to come in, and maybe that is going to impact Netflix's long-term chances of being a huge successful company. But I believe in the model of Netflix. I'm a Netflix subscriber, and thus I have decided, Lewis, to invest some money in Netflix. Another one, and this one, I don't even know if I'm still bullish on it. I've owned shares of Sirius satellite radio stock for a long time. I've been a subscriber to Sirius Radio for a very long time, and I've owned the stock for a long time. And I don't know if anything's ever going to happen. And actually, any day now, we may hear that Howard Stern is not renewing his contract on Sirius, although he may renew it. And if that happens, I am not totally sure what is going to be the future of Sirius Radio. And that's there's a couple more that escape me now, but I don't really own many individual stocks because I just don't think, I'm not a pro at that. And I don't think it's really the safest or most prudent way to invest.
Yeah. Well, I don't. I used to own a few individual stocks, not anymore. That was actually all sold off before the market crashed.
Well, that's smart.
That's how long it's been. And I have not gone down that road since, Dave. So
for the average person, I really don't think, especially once you consider trading fees, and I know sometimes you get a few free trades when you get involved with a new stock or whatever, to do what makes sense, which is to be diversified and to be regularly increasing your holdings, whether you can with a little bit of money every week or every month, even if it's just $25 or $50. It gets very expensive to do that with individual stocks, whereas you can set up with broad diversified mutual funds. Again, this is not investment advice. This is just my personal view on this. You can accumulate it on a weekly, monthly, yearly basis without constantly paying trading fees, $4 or $7 every time you buy and sell. And for the average person, Lewis, I think that is really what makes the most sense.
Yeah, agreed. It's play it safe, Dave. We're not gamblers, right?
And you especially, now that you don't play poker anymore.
Yeah, it's been what, like it's over a decade. Yeah, I don't like to gamble, and I would not recommend it.
Second question today is from Robin. Robin says, I'm all for supporting free speech, but should we really champion particularly hateful speech just for the sake of supporting free speech? To that end, is the ACLU that great of an organization? Yeah, this is an interesting question. We can disagree. We often hear that phrase. I vehemently disagree with what you're saying, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. And it's a popular statement. People like to say it. It doesn't matter if I don't agree. You should be allowed to say whatever it is that you want to say. You can be an unrestricted supporter of free speech, saying, as long as we're not talking about speech that violates laws because it is a specific threat, for example, or whatever, I support free speech. We can say that, yet still not champion particularly vile or hateful speech. I defend the right of the Westboro Baptist Church to say whatever it is they want. Granted, they're not breaking any laws with regard to funeral protesting or whatever it is that they're doing, threatening people, etc. Does that mean that I need to go around talking about how great it is that the Westboro Baptist Church is able to say what it says? Of course not. Now, as far as that part goes, Lewis, where do you come in on this thing? The idea of championing particularly hateful speech versus just being in favor of free speech.
Well, I'm remembering that conference you went to where Rush Limbaugh came out on stage and everybody in the place stood up and started clapping.
Because he got the free speech award or whatever, yeah.
Yeah, and you did not clap? Or, you did clap?
I think I stood and I coughed, and I pretended to be too busy with my coughing to really be able to clap or something.
I would not have clapped for him. And, there are people like Glenn Beck, Savage, Alex Jones, Limbaugh. We know that there have been people who listen to the things they say,
right,
who then commit violent acts. And are these radio hosts and personalities instructing people to do that? No, of course not.
Right.
But it's still incredibly, incredibly harmful. But the ACLU does do great things, and you need to have an organization like that does make sure that the First Amendment is not infringed upon.
There's sort of this binary question: do you support free speech or don't you? Right? And the answer can be yes. And that doesn't mean that you are proactively cheerleading particularly hateful or vile speech. And There's an interesting story. Bill Newman, the ACLU attorney who does the Civil Liberties Minute, when he was early in his ACLU career, he told me the story. He was representing Paul Cameron, the virulent anti-gay nut who we've interviewed on the show many times, who was going to be speaking at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst, Massachusetts. And there was some protest that was so significant that he was not going to be able to speak. And Bill Newman, who doesn't agree with anything that Paul Cameron says, was tasked with representing Paul Cameron and ensuring that he be able to speak. Was he championing the specifics of what Paul Cameron was going to say, or was he merely saying, hey, if we have a university that is in favor of free speech, then we need to allow them to speak. We're not promoting the ideas, we're not promoting them, but we can't allow threat of violence to prevent the speech.
Yeah. He, of course, was not championing hate speech in any way, and I'm sure he found what Paul Cameron had to say despicable. But this type of work needs to happen. This needs to be done. Of course, now we have universities all over the country. Students are they're basically trying to quash freedom of speech. They don't want anything inflammatory or anything even remotely controversial or polarizing said.
Some students.
Many. I would say many students. Yeah. It's and Dave, it's not acceptable. We have to allow everyone to say whatever they want, as long as they are not inciting violence.
Send me your thoughts on this. Is there a difference between, with no reservations, supporting free speech and championing particularly hateful speech? I think the difference is absolutely huge. If I'm wrong, absolutely let me know. Laura wrote in. Laura said, David, should humans really drink milk? Is it actually healthy? There's a big movement now, Lewis, that is increasingly saying humans should not drink milk. And there's sort of a few different arguments against the drinking of milk. There's the just flat out vegan argument, right? Which is we should not be consuming animal products. Even the milking of cows is inhumane because the cows have to be kept pregnant in order to be producing milk. And it is pregnancy after pregnancy. And it just, there could be a climate change component with the idea of the methane gas that milk cows release combined with the transporting of milk all over the place. So there's sort of that argument. There's a health argument that's being made, which is, wait a second. Humans drinking cow milk. Cow milk is designed to quickly add weight to baby cows. It is a high calorie, at least in its whole milk form. It is a high calorie drink that is not really for human consumption. Human babies consume milk from the mother during a time of their lives when they need to be putting on regular weight. And we shouldn't just be casually having glasses of milk throughout our lives. Now, the proponents of milk say calcium, very good source of calcium, other vitamins, other minerals in milk. It's an important part of a balanced diet for people of all ages. Milk's benefits include weight loss. If you are getting protein calories from milk, you are going to feel more full and presumably eat fewer unhealthy, unfilling, empty carbs, for example. It strengthens bones. It improves cardiovascular and oral health, some studies say. There may be cancer prevention positives to cow milk, et cetera, et cetera. What do you think about this, Lewis? Where are you right now on the drinking milk debate that has arisen?
Okay. Of course, all of my evidence is anecdotal
Naturally.
or that of other countries and other people. So I drank milk my whole life. I would have it with my cereal in the morning. Okay.
Right.
I started out with whole milk. And by the way, whole milk is 4% fat. I mean, so the stuff coming out of cows, you have to skim chunks of fat off of this stuff.
I thought whole milk was 8% for some reason, but I don't know where I got that.
I think it's 4.
You may be right.
So, okay, now I do goat's milk in the morning. And
Really?
It's either whole or 2% usually, and I have very healthy cereal. I love it. I think it's great. And many people in other parts of the world, areas where you have very low cancer rates, people living through very long ages, dairy is usually a decent part of their diet.
But that's tricky. You know where we go with that. Are those populations healthy because they're consuming the dairy products, or are they generally healthy and it just so happens that dairy is a part of their diet?
I believe it's a combination of things, but
Right.
but the dairy
Anecdotally, of course.
Yeah, the dairy is part of it, and so I still do yogurt from cows because it just in this country it's almost impossible to get anything else unless you're paying for $3 a little thing for sheep's yogurt. It's insane.
Sure.
But I don't know. I mean, I'm in good health. I've been doing it my whole life. I feel great. There are many people, though, who have an intolerance. It's not like gluten. It's very, very common.
Right.
And there's a wide range of intolerances to lactose. But a lot of those people can drink goat's milk instead.
Sure.
Anyway, that's my input.
So it sounds to me like you're saying you're pro milk. Now,
Yes.
you've expressed many times that you're very much aware that right now we have this real problem with the lack of sustainability of meat, right? The
Yes.
amount of water and land and food and corn that is being used to raise a pound of beef, for example, is just totally unsustainable, particularly as the population continues to increase. How does that play in to your being pro-milk?
Well, certainly I don't like that, but I think you can achieve a balance if we are if we are a bit more responsible and we cut down our consumption, then we drastically reduce the carbon emissions, right?
Sure.
Not just of milk, of meat. And you can go with other animals too, like goats and things like that, and just lower our consumption. But I want to have milk available, Dave, so I'm not going to say that because of the carbon emissions, we should cut it out altogether.
You've predicted that because of the huge environmental impact of raising meat for human consumption, that in the future, meat consumption is going to have to go down, that it's just not sustainable. Do you think dairy will be impacted in the same way?
I think it probably will, yes. But, Dave, the people who enjoy milk, the cheese makers, the people making products from it, it's just a huge part of life. I mean, how can you can't throw that out, but we can certainly cut down on the meat consumption. I think that's way more important.
All right. You've heard it from Lewis. Very, very interesting. Yeah, I drink milk. I eat yogurt. I eat cheese, etc. Although, as I've said many times, I work to reduce my meat consumption significantly. And as I think I've said before, other than at a particularly good steakhouse that I was at in October where I ordered a steak, I can't remember the last time before that I have either purchased and cooked or ordered a steak at a restaurant. And so I'm actively working to sort of eat less meat. And that's that. let me remind you, if you want the 2016 Patriot Mail calendar, I happen to have it right here. It is extraordinary. 100 or more of these have already gone out. Every page is a viewer-created graphic related to Patriot Mail. Get the calendar at davidpakman.com/calendar16. And if you want the calendar for free, you can get it for free on that same page.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.